It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre.
What's our topic today?
What is our topic? The Poly Newbie Survival Kit is our right? How as a newbie to survive opening up your relationship. Things to consider. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can just jump in.
Let's jump.
Yeah. So, hello, everyone who's joining us. Please say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. So let's do an introduction because we have a lot of new people who may be watching us for the first time. I'm Tara Lynn Franco. I am a relationship and openness coach supporting people who are non-monogamous or polyamorous.
You do support them. That's wonderful. And I am Andre Targat. I'm a sex positive psychotherapist, also supporting people.
We are the co-founders of this online community, Let's Talk Polyamory, and we have two programs. We have our Poly Newbies course and our Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery course. We created those to help individuals and couples have healthy, non-monogamous relationships. For many people, in maintaining the security of their relationship if they're opening.
Yeah, it's so strange, right? You'd think that, well, what could possibly go wrong? We're going to open up our relationship. It's all going to be unicorns and rainbows. It's going to be fantastic. What could ever be the issue? And yet we get contact by a lot of people who are having some difficulties in different areas. And we were able to identify some of those problems, some of those repetitions, and we speak directly to those.
We share tips and help you identify some things that will get you to the next level of awesomeness. So let's start with an exciting announcement. So I did mention in our intro that we have a Poly Newbies course. This is for people who are, maybe curious about what it might be like to be non-monogamous. Maybe they've already opened an existing relationship, or they want to be polyamorous or a swinger or in the lifestyle. So it basically gives you the essentials to getting started off on the right foot, and in hopes of helping you avoid many of the common newbie mistakes that people make. There's a membership site where all the trainings are recorded, and you'll find all the exercises and additional resources that we have available. So you can drop newbie in the comments, and we'll make sure that we send you the link. We'll also drop the link in here later.
Yeah, exciting.
So
cool.
It's a poly course. And, we picked this topic because the course, like today, is a bit of your Poly Newbie Survival Kit, I'd say. Yeah.
Survival kit.
Okay.
All you need.
Well, you like to be prepared. I like to be prepared. And, when we started this and looking out on the internet, there really isn't a place where people can get all the information in one place. So you tend to have to spend a lot of time, like we did when we started, looking all over the internet, trying to find definitions and things. Do you remember way back then?
I do, but it's interesting to me that our styles are so different. So you want to be prepared, and I'm kind of more spontaneous, more organic, in other words, lazy, and I don't do all that stuff. And I'd rather just fumble through it and make these horrific mistakes and then learn from it. But there are a lot of people out there who don't want to make the mistake and then see how they survive it. So yeah, looking back in hindsight, maybe it would have been well suited to have a course like ours where I could have avoided some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, exactly. We did make a few mistakes along the way, but it helped us get to where we are now, and also build this stuff and support other people so that the journey is a little less.
Yeah, and no doubt. And we will continue to make mistakes in the future. But one of the things we've also learned and developed was our communication style and finding out how are we going to talk about these things. And what happens when it might go off the rails, or before it goes off the rails? How do we have these very important conversations? Whereas before opening up this way, I kind of took it for granted that we would just speak and things would kind of work their way out. And most often it kind of does, but there are better ways of communicating, and we've really become attuned to communication treatment and how we're able to increase our likelihood of survival or have less errors on the way.
Exactly. Communication. So let's jump in. So curious that from people, and you can drop your comment in the comments, is where are you in your poly journey stage? So we talked about being a poly newbie, but you may be at the point where you're not poly yet, you're poly curious, you've started, you're practicing, you're terrified, experienced, or you're a veteran. And I think what's interesting of this about, while I think people start with not being poly, and then, you know, going in a cycle clockwise. I think many people can jump, you can jump steps, but you can also end up back in certain steps, like especially things like polyterrified or practicing. Especially if you decide to change your style of non-monogamy, you may revert back to practicing because it may not be as familiar, or you may be terrified. Anyways, just curious, you can drop your comment in the comments. Yeah.
The not poly part is curious because it makes me think about in our video diary entries, the question was asked, could we ever be too young to be non-monogamous? And I find it so very interesting because part of me says, well, we start off as young kids going to school and then we develop interest. And do we have interest in many people and then decide to couple with one person? Or are we kind of informed by our attachment styles, then we want to couple with somebody and are perhaps anxious about being with a lot of other people? And to say if we're too young to be non-monogamous, in some ways, I think it's actually beneficial that we resist being monogamous because then we might have many different sounds. It's like going to the buffet and only eating the buttered chicken. You wouldn't know of all those other wonderful dishes. Whereas if we if we resist going to that one that's so secure, we might have a bigger sampling of the buffet. So it's interesting. What are we looking before being polyamorous?
Well, I heard somebody who's polyamorous now talking about themselves being a child and how when they were a child, they had lots of what they call their boyfriends and girlfriends, right? And they had multiple people. So they established all these close emotional relationships with kids of their age. And to them, it was perfectly normal to say, this is my boyfriend, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend, and have multiples. And then as we age, we see it's more common to see more models that are monogamous. And, you know, we might have parents that are together or even apart and see people coupling and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, and then abandon the idea. I'm sort of interested, like, you know, I think maybe I was like that as a kid.
Yeah. Well, you know, as you said, it makes me think back to those little kindergarten circles where we're all together, we're all playing and, you know, we're just sharing and playing and doing all that stuff. But then later on, I might get my bicycle and I might get my own ring and all this and become individuated. And then I start gathering things and possessions. And do I do the same with the relationships and people? This is my mate. This is my thing. So maybe it is about the possession. But anyway, we're going off on a tangent. Let's go back to where we heard this program.
Oh, okay. So what does it take to survive and thrive as a poly newbie? So we've got 7 things listed here, and these are the same modules that are in our Poly Newbies course. Right. So this is a bit of also a little bit of a sneak peek as well, but what we think are the essentials to get you started. So number 1.
Start with the basics.
Start with the basics. So educate yourself on what's out there. So a little bit of Poly 101, common definitions you'll hear, like Persian and metamor and all that. Because once you start meeting people, people will be using these words, and it's good to be familiar with. But also the basics, like how do you actually start in opening a relationship? And these are all things that we talk about. Go ahead.
Well, what to do before you actually open it up, the conversations we might have, the considerations that we might consider.
Yeah, we have our 5 things to do, and what sort of issues you might. So it's good to identify those first.
And it's so amazing, right? Because I don't know what I was expecting before it actually happened. So how would I know what to expect? It's like, you don't know what you don't know. And yet we've gone through this with consultation of many other people's experience as well. And we can now tell you what you might expect. You know, there's always surprises, but it's also good to look at the map beforehand and say, well, I'm here, I want to get over there. How am I going to go about it? You know, there's some swamps or some boogeymen I might want to avoid, or I want to go visit them and find out what happens. We get to chart that course.
Yeah, and in the module and of course we have a worksheet where you can identify some of the things that you might be worried to start off with, which is great because if you don't really think about it, you might just jump in and go ignore it. But if you are aware of the things that you're worried about, then you can make a plan to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might jump into it and just see where it goes, and you might end up in a place that you're not necessarily favoring, right? Whereas when we do have the information, we can make an informed decision and say, okay, this is where I wanted to go with it. And that kind of brings us to number 2, is knowing what style of non-monogamy might be right for us, because there are many different ways of open relating.
Exactly. And this is one of the diagrams we commonly use from Jessica Firm's Polysecure, which kind of shows the different styles from monogamy all the way to relationship anarchy. But what I like about this, and the thing we talk about in the course, is how each of these is different and how you may choose depending on the level of sexual or emotional exclusivity you're interested in. And, you know, you can start at any of these stages. You can start right at polyamory. The little yellow show common progression that people made, but that's not to say that you have to take that route. A lot of people don't, but there's lots of options. And knowing what feels comfortable in terms of those levels of exclusivity, sexual and emotional, is an important piece of starting, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's not one size fits all, right? So there's no straight line that says you have to go from A to 2, 1 to B, all those things. And it may shift over time. You may decide that you want to play one way in the beginning and then come to find out that there's other ways you may want to be, and you go back and forth and you find out what is right for you, what works and what doesn't work. But the best way, the most successful of those relationships, regardless of which destination it might be, is when they are spoken about openly with ourselves and with our partners and the other partners that we might have. And that comes to number 3. It's all about great communication.
Great communication, learning how to communicate and identifying some of your destructive communication patterns. This is from one of our trainings as well. This is just an example of some of the communication techniques that you might be engaging in. And even if you're not doing these things now, I know for myself personally, when you're feeling triggered by something related to your being non-monogamous, some of these techniques, which aren't great, like yes, butting and kitchen sinking, these can come at play. And so identifying some of those destructive communication patterns and then working on the effective ones, which we talked about as well, can help overcome those things.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. And also nonviolent communication, we talk about that as well.
We sure do.
So great communication, number 3. Number 4, this is the big one that people come with. And I know sometimes this is where people start because this is the first feeling that they're having, which is understanding your patterns of jealousy and building security in yourself and your relationship. And I remember we did the training on jealousy and we talked about what happens when we're jealous. Am I feeling jealous? And what's going on in terms of the circumstance, situation, scenario, and then how it's manifesting. And so understanding your own patterns of jealousy will help you break down and deconstruct them.
And this really speaks to the merits of the course or of a roadmap. When we went into it, we did not look ahead as to how we might feel potentially. And then when jealousy did come up, I was, taken back by like, wow, what's going on? And I think it would have been better served, would have been much less discomfort had we talked about it beforehand and said to ourselves, well, what might cause jealousy to come up? What actions would take place? And then how could we unpack that? How could we process it so we're not just feeling captive by this green-eyed monster, that we might be able to know that it is survivable and know that, in fact, while it is perhaps uncomfortable at the moment, we can survive it and actually be stronger coming at the other end of it. But we would only know that if we were able to talk about it first and beforehand, rather than just have to endure all of those feelings of discomfort and kind of go through it without the lights on. So there's a chance to recognize the potential for it, but kind of do the work to lay the foundation for it beforehand, rather than just going to jump into it, feeling that pain point, and then learning, well, what the hell is happening? And, is it me? Is it them? Is it us? All of these questions come out and we feel just very unprepared.
Yeah. And approaching things with curiosity. I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in both this shorter course and as well in our more intense course, Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery, is approaching all these things with curiosity. This is the first time you're doing these things and we're not going to do them perfectly. Just understanding what's happening, your responses, and then, moving forward from that and learning from it. So,
but it's also good that we have that kind of platform to talk about it, and that in the groups also that we might hear from other people, and it helps us, one, to feel less unique, less isolated, as though I'm the only person that ever feels it, but also to hear the other person say, I can identify with that aspect, or maybe there's something that we didn't consider. It's like, I never thought of it that way. That's another big part of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, and even if people are at different stages and you are hearing what's going on in their life, like, oh, that might be something that I might anticipate or that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was jealousy, number 4. So number 5 is understanding your attachment style and how it might be impacting your relationship and shifting all that to secure attachment. I was just going to show this.
Yeah, again, okay, perfect. There it is.
Yeah. So this is another diagram. It's also from Jessica Byrne's Polysecure, which shows the various types of attachment that you can experience. The security at the upper left-hand corner, and then the 3 insecure ones, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized at the bottom. And I mean, the idea behind understanding your attachment style is not to negate, like justify certain actions or behavior, but learn from it in order to move towards secure attachment.
Yeah, move towards secure attachment. That's a good point to bring up, because you may have kind of been brought up in or been born into one attachment style and feel, say, like you're anxious or avoidant, but it's not to say that that is the fait complete. It's not to be the end of it. We can transition. We can learn more secure attachments and allow for those types of relationships as well. So it's not the curse of death that says you're always going to be this way. We can progress to something, some other way of being. Yeah, something that we consider to be healthier, right? We want to be able to attach to people and feel secure in that way of being.
Yeah, I think the one thing that people don't anticipate that comes up from them, especially if you're opening up an existing relationship, is you may feel secure in that relationship at that point and go, yeah, I'm ready. And then you go and open it up, and then all of a sudden it feels like, what the hell happened? Like, I thought we were good. And I think what people sometimes fail to understand, and I think is important to understand, is that, I experienced it myself as well. I felt very secure with you. Even though we opened up fairly early, I felt secure in our relationship. But what you don't expect necessarily is that as soon as you open up, you are dismantling the sort of the structure of the relationship that may be how you're feeling secure. So I'm feeling secure because the structure of this relationship is monogamous. And I know this, we've committed in some way to being together, not cheating on each other, blah, blah, blah. So you may feel secure in that relationship, even if you have some insecure attachment associated with it. I just think that's an interesting point. I think that people are surprised by it. Number 5 is attachment style. And number 6 is boundaries, rules, and agreements. So we go over these 3 things, and I think it's important. I just wanted to show this diagram because I really love this boundaries one, because these things can interplay. So it's good to understand what the difference is between all these things and what do you need.
And, it kind of, for me, goes back to the communication part. So we have an understanding of what our boundaries are and what we're wanting and not wanting. We recognize another person, but how are we going to know, and how are we going to share those things? And it is through healthier communication patterns, being able to communicate well, feeling as though we are entitled to have our ways. Because sometimes some people might find it difficult to announce what they're wanting and not wanting from themselves or from the other person, because they may have some level of codependence or consideration for the other person's kind of aspect of people pleasing. And it might make it more difficult for them. Whereas when we do learn these healthy communication ways, when we do see the value of announcing our parameters, our boundaries, our agreements, it makes us feel more secure, healthier, and then we can have a better way of going about this opening.
Yeah, I think it's important. I totally agree. I think the communication part is the big one, because people do sometimes use these terms interchangeably and are different things. So I think it's important to have your own personal boundaries. Boundaries are personal, and agreements, having agreements with your partners. And then communicating so that everybody knows what's going on, and then everybody can consent to it. And that communication piece is so important, because I think one of the biggest issues that comes up is some misunderstanding. Like, I thought we had this rule, or I thought we had this boundary, and you've now broken it. So that's the big piece about these things. Like you said, is all about communication, which is why that's way up in the list.
But also, how would you know my boundary if I have not yet told you, right? So are we going to feel comfortable announcing it, and can we listen to hear what the other person's boundaries are? I mean, it's such an important step. It's so much about the communication.
Yeah, and we have a great exercise in the course about that. Yeah, because I think before we started working through these things, I didn't really think about what my boundaries are. Sometimes you don't recognize them until they've been crossed. So it's actually good to really think about, what are sort of things might come up, and is this going to be a boundary for me? Yeah.
And like STI testing, for example, the more we talk about it, the easier it gets to talk.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it might be difficult to announce your boundary, or to say, this is not part of my agreement, or not something I want to agree to. But as we put it into practice, we become more and more comfortable with it. And also, when we're comfortable and confident with it, then the other person feels more secure. Like, oh, okay, it's just a matter of fact, that's what they like or they don't like. And maybe I can announce the same way and do it in a very comfortable way. And then we have a better understanding, and voila, we go from there.
Yeah, the STI testing is a great example, because that's one of our agreements. One of our agreements is that we value our sexual health, and we asked all of our partners about their STI testing.
Yeah. And, I've said this.
And get tested ourselves.
For sure. But in the beginning, for me, I felt like I was being kind of creepy or pervy. Like, here we are on a date and it's looking like it's going well. And all of a sudden, hey, I want to talk about STI testing. And they, I imagine that they're going to think, oh my God, like, what kind of VD does he have? And no, it's just that I'm concerned about my health, my partner's health, and my other partner's health.
Yeah.
And
It's a community.
it sure is. So we are active participants in that, and we talk about it in a very matter-of-fact, normalized way. We destigmatize. And it's not only STIs, it's a whole bunch of things, how we're going to relate to each
I love it. Like the other day, we had a visit with people that we know quite well, and they just announced, they were like, I think because there was a possibility that there might be some activity, they announced, we just got tested, and everything came back clear. I just love that they just announced it, and because they know that that's important to us, and obviously it's important to them too.
Yeah.
So I love when
So do I.
you can, it's crazy. No, I think it's great.
I think it's great too.
Okay. So that was number 6. And then number 7 is all the other stuff. There's a bunch of little things that pull it all together in terms of your survival kit. So learning how to date.
Reviews and check-ins with each other.
Yeah, sort of our business meeting. Yeah, we have a review and check-in call, how to date as a polyamorous or open person, and how to address parties and all kinds of other things.
The do's and don'ts.
And then what are your next steps and how do you continue the journey? Because this is just the beginning. So these 7 things, starting with the basics, educating yourself, knowing what style of non-monogamy is right for you.
Great communication, always about communication.
Understanding jealousy, your patterns, and working towards security, building security in yourself and in your relationships.
Understanding your attachment style, right? So knowing where you're coming from and how you can create more secure attachment relationships.
Number 6 is boundaries, rules, and agreements. And what's the difference between all these things?
And then pulling it all together, putting a bow on it.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. So these are all the absolute essentials we believe there are on getting started. And it's why we're super excited to have pulled all this together in all-in-one course that will give you all these things. So all these 7 things are the modules in our course, and which will all be on a membership site and include additional resources. Each module has at least one worksheet to go with it. And everything's recorded in, like I said, on the membership and accessible to you 24/7. You can drop newbie in the comments or 15-minute, and we will put that in the comments as well. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Andre.
Thank you, Tara.
Well, let us know what you think, and hope you'll join us for Poly Newbies. So.
If you want to have relationships that are secure, sexy, and satisfying, take advantage of our Black Friday deal on our Poly Newbies Digital Course. Only $27 until December 2nd, 2024. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic and sexy day.